Welcome to our new series on guns of gangsters.
The Remington Model 11 is one of the cooler and more prolific shotguns of all time, serving as the basis to the combat automatic shotgun.
And while it was widely used in service by the good guys, it also caught the attention of the bad guys.
The most notable of which was Bonnie Parker of the Barrow Gang. She made a set of modifications to the gun that would notoriously have it known as the Whippit gun.
So join us today as we look back in history at likely the most notorious gangster shotgun of all time. Greetings, families of America. Welcome to Guns of Gangsters, and it's going to be grand. We've got a few installments of this series that we're going to be doing, and it's going to be pretty cool. We're going to be bringing you guys some cool guns, cool conversations, cool time on the range of all the guns that we're going to be covering in Guns of Gangsters. I would say this is the most literal.
Sure.
Where it's like, this one truly is like kind of unique to a gangster.
Sure.
A lot of the other ones are, look, this is a popular gun. It was used by a lot of people, amongst them perhaps gangsters, but it was a popular gun used by a lot of people. So today we're talking about Bonnie Parker of Bonnie and Clyde. We're talking about her Whippit gun, and I feel some need to state this up front, even though we're trying to give you guys entertainment and bring you something enjoyable to watch. Bonnie and Clyde were not good people, and this is
actually
not
the worst.
This is not any sort of endorsement of Bonnie and Clyde. So don't think that this is us glorifying them. But to deny that Bonnie had a pretty interesting shotgun would also be disingenuous.
Right. Well, I mean, the gangster history is it's in the fabric of American history.
Yeah.
So I think, to deny it's kind of useless.
Yes.
So let's just talk about it. And let's be honest, from a gun guy perspective, there's some cool stuff the gangsters used.
There is some cool stuff, right?
So.
And I mean, we're going back to Prohibition era, which, what a lovely backdrop we've got with barrels. We're here, for those of you guys that have picked up our Miracle on 1911 Street blend before, we're at the Whiskey Blendery, which is who does our whiskey blend and many other wonderful things that I enjoy in my leisure time at home. So,
right.
So we've got that going. But for folks who may not know who the mustached man is, perhaps you should tell the folks.
Hey, y'all. My name's Eli. I work for Alchemy Custom Weaponry. I also have my own channel, 1776 Duck, on Instagram and YouTube. But Alchemy Custom Weaponry is the main gig. Obviously, we make hand-built, hand-fit 1911s. They're super gangster themselves. So, if you check us out.
Yeah, we did a video for those of you who are like, kind of what goes into making hand-fit 1911s. We did a pretty cool, really way more educational than we typically do. Really a kind of a little mini deep dive down the alchemy world that we filmed in Fort Wayne last year, showing how the guns kind of go through the process of getting hand fit and all that fun stuff. So check that out. If I remember, I'll throw a link below, but it's definitely cool for those of you that like 1911s and you're like, well, what goes into an alchemy? There you go. Scope that one out.
Yeah, 1911's a good gangster gun itself.
Yes, it is. So let's talk some history of the Whippit gun.
All right, race fans, let's talk about the A5, but before we kind of get into your gun, get into kind of the meat and taters of this, let's kind of clarify something. The A5 you have is an FN manufactured firearm.
Yes.
In the States, however, the version of that was popular was the Remington Model 11. Mm-hmm. Really, the biggest difference that you may need to know is that the A5 has a magazine shutoff. Pretty cool. I doubt that Bonnie Parker ever used that.
I think she wanted the mag to feed, probably.
Correct. So without further ado, let's talk about Bonnie Parker's. Now, I want to talk about hers specifically, although we will kind of mention some other people who use the A5 Remington Model 11. And it's important to note that this is sort of the genesis of the automatic combat shotgun. You know, you go out there, y'all, you know, tactical dudes with your 1301s and your Benelli M4s. This is kind of where it started. You know, I mean, that's where the genesis traces back to. So let's talk about Bonnie's gun in particular. So unlike yours, hers was a Remington Model 11.
Sure.
And unlike yours, hers was a 20 gauge. Now, like yours, it was the barrel was lopped off and the buttstock was shortened. Of course, as we've talked about, the buttstock can't be shortened down to a pistol grip because part of the action actually extends back into the buttstock.
Yeah, we haven't actually talked about that. We'll be going to the range after this,
Sure.
and you guys will kind of get the breakdown of how the guns actually run.
Yeah, absolutely. So this gun is known as the Whippit gun. The Whippit gun, obviously that was meant to be carried up under a coat of design, some design.
Sure.
And then whipped out. Not to be mistaken with other things you may whip out.
I mean, both not very socially acceptable.
Sure.
Both frowned upon, you might say.
Yeah, if you're in a bank and you whip out that or the other thing you might whip out, it's not going to be great.
You will be asked to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's one of those things. The Barrow Gang themselves were pretty fond of shotguns. Of course, Bonnie was really famous, especially at that time, too, because there really wasn't a lot of female gangsters or female bad people.
Sure.
So the Barrow Gang was pretty famous for the wrong reasons, of course.
Yeah.
America did somewhat fall in love with them, but they didn't really know exactly how bad they were at the time.
Right. Yeah. There was a romanticism to it, which was odd because it was like,
Yeah.
boy, there ain't nothing romantic about this.
And, you know, both of them were strewn with STDs. I mean, it's just a mess. I mean, when you really look into Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow, I mean, they're real bad.
Yeah.
Like they're not heroes in any sense of the stretch of imagination.
No.
So but they did really like shotguns.
Look, they had some cool guns, let's be honest.
I mean, they actually had another gun they considered. Some other people call it the Whippit gun, which is the cut down BAR.
Yeah.
I actually have suspicion that gun probably never ran really well because I've seen and I have friends who have cut down BARs without modification and they don't usually run super well. So anyways, they had a BAR they shortened in the same manner as the Remington Model 11.
Sure.
So it's interesting to note, too, the last on Bonnie in particular, that when Frank Hamer and company gunned them down, good scene in The Highwayman, too.
I was going to say, and if you guys really want a movie recommendation that is just outstanding, I mean, the Highwayman on Netflix.
It's got some historical things that are, you know, not 100% correct, but as far as just like good old-fashioned like gunfighting scenes,
God,
that end scene really is...
The end scene, the scene in the
And
gun
the guns,
shop.
the guns,
I mean, with Frank
yeah.
in the gun shop picking out the guns, you're just like, this
Yeah.
is vintage gun guy.
And you're like, why can't gun stores look like that now?
I know.
You know. But to that point, a shotgun very similar to that Remington, that shortened A5, which would have been her Remington Model 11 in 20 gauge, was found next to her.
Right.
When they kind of were going through the
Yeah.
through the car,
Right.
actually. So
Right.
she was definitely down to clown when they pulled out of the bushes on that road when they ambushed them. I mean, she was ready to rock, but not ready enough.
Yeah. Not today, Bonnie.
Since we're talking about the combat use of the gun, I do want to quickly talk about some other people who have used the A5 or Remington Model 11 in a combat role. Generally, it has been used in one form or another from basically the time it came out till about the Vietnam War. In fact, I actually have a Remington Model 11 that's U.S. property marked.
Oh, that's cool.
World War II U.S. property marked.
Oh, hell yeah.
Riot gun. So that is a pretty cool gun. I got that at Griffin and Howe. But I do want to talk about a couple of big note ones. My favorite, Charles Askins Jr., Texas Border Patrol. He had a Remington Model 11, and his actually was, and we're talking the 1920s, his actually was modified by a gunsmith who would go on to work at Packmeyer. It had an extended magazine tube. Okay, it was shortened, but it had an extended magazine tube, slightly shortened buttstock, or at least to his dimensions.
Length of pull, yeah.
And it also, he tied like a white rag on the end of the barrel as like a quasi night sight.
Okay. Sure.
Listen,
Yeah.
when you get into Charles Askins, you don't really ask questions. I mean,
It just gets a little wild.
He just gets he gets things done. And the big reason he actually went to the Model 11 or the shotgun in general was in his book he says it was easier to hit targets on the run.
Well, that's a frowned upon practice. It's not an advisable thing.
Many Texas Rangers also used it during that time period. Lone Wolf Gonzalez is pictured actually with a really cool one in a super cool rig in his car. Actually, I believe that picture is taken just post World War II. As I mentioned before, there was limited use in the Great War all the way through Vietnam. Again, like it is an action that needs to be cleaned. So as a military arm, it is somewhat limited,
sure.
you know?
Yeah.
And then one of my favorite variations is actually its use in the Rhodesian Bush War.
Okay.
So there was, instead of shortening them, they actually had a longer one with a longer forearm and a crazy extended tube that they used. So, which that conflict in itself is just a crazy time to be alive. But really a unique firearm, a really cool gun, and certainly the genesis of the automatic combat shotgun.
It sounds like that's probably a good time to cut over to the range and start shooting this absolute meat tenderizer. Okay, boys and girls, here on the range, just want to show you guys sort of a practical demonstration of how both the FN A5 works, but also specifically the Whippit gun. Because if you're into modern shooting and or modern shotgun shooting, you could definitely pick this up and not quite know, how does this work? How are we supposed to grip this? What do we do? Like, it is a little confusing if you're only into more modern stuff. So perhaps display some controls.
Yeah, so the Browning A5, of course, as we've covered, Bonnie's shotgun was a Remington Model 11. However, virtually the same gun operationally will actually start at the change, and that will be found on this side of the gun. Now, for all you at home, the gun is
Indeed
empty
clear
and safe. So, I'm just making sure I check for myself. So, we're going to start on this side of the gun here. This is a magazine tube shutoff. So, you can actually flip this little lever, okay? And it has a claw that kind of just simply just blocks the rounds from coming down into the chamber. I mean, it's really that simple.
Yeah.
And that's really your major difference between this and the Remington Model 11. Both guns are a long action system, which means, and I'm sure we'll show good footage, but just to kind of illustrate it, again, guns unloaded, you can actually see the barrel reciprocate back into the bolt. Okay, so that's a really unique thing about the Browning A5. Really cool thing, let's be honest. So that is a really, really cool thing about the Browning A5 and the Remington Model 11. The rest of its recoil action is actually back here, which is why you can never see one cut as like a pistol grip. You actually have to have this,
right?
Because part of its recoil system is housed in the stock. As you have found out, this gun relies on you as much as you rely on it to shoot it. And what I mean is, if you're a handgun shooter, you may know the term limp wristing.
I don't.
Oh,
but people
you're
who
never
have
limp.
done that, no.
Yeah, you're never limp.
Hard 24/7.
Limp wristing is just mean you're not holding the handgun hard enough, and the action is actually not able to cycle correctly because of that. There's a lot of things that go into that. We won't talk about it right now. Basically, if you hold this gun too loosely off your body, there's a good chance you may not actually eject the spent casing and therefore load the one after it. So when you're shooting something like this, you do have to brace it against your hip. You can tuck it into your into your side. I wouldn't recommend that. And actually, we were even playing around with using your chest, which actually I do like. It hurts, but I do like it.
If you're a glutton for punishment, it's a great time.
Yeah, I actually have quite enjoyed it, to be honest with you. As we're very familiar, I'm kind of into the BDSM thing. Yeah. So I love this gun. I think it's a really awesome gun, and it's fun to shoot.
A couple other little features. So you've got a safety there. It's basically on the trigger guard there.
It's it kind of reminds you actually of like the M1 Garand.
Yeah.
So you have to actually come into the trigger guard to flick it off.
Yeah, very mini 14-ish.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
same. You know.
I mean, we kind of look at that today as, you know, is that the best place to put a safety? But, you know, that's actually where a lot of guns back then kind of had something like that.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that is where the safety is. Of course, your kind of bolt release, I guess you'd call it right here, is just a button right there. So other than that, though, the gun is operationally a normal semi-automatic tube-fed shotgun.
Yeah. Now, in terms of if we look at the historical context of the Whippit gun, of course, the term Whippit, I mean, if we kind of just, you know, roughly show what the intent was.
Sure, absolutely. So Whippit, the term, actually got traced all the way back to the American West regarding gunfighting. And as it sounds, whip it's just whip it out. It's a gun that you just whip out. It's typically hidden underneath a coat. Now, if you don't mind, if I'm gonna step right here, Jake, you will see the shotgun obviously is pretty short.
Yep.
As we've talked about, it was for, you know, bad people. Bad people like to use this gun. And what they would typically do is, I actually think there are some documents talking about a strap that hooked right around the shoulder, and then this would fall like this underneath your jacket. And actually, you know, I mean, underneath a larger jacket that was definitely in vogue at the time of the Great Depression and, of course, Prohibition, you probably wouldn't notice if somebody had something like that under their jacket. And, of course, from there, keep in mind this sling would be right here, they would just simply whip the gun out.
Yep.
Whip it.
You know what's interesting about that?
Mm-hmm.
Can you think of any other, I'll call it pop culture reference, where that came into play?
I know you're going to flame me for it. No, what is it?
Heat.
Oh, yeah, actually, wow, I can't believe I
Isn't it actually
think
like
about that.
ultimately kind of a similar system?
Very similar, yeah. And that really, since firearms became something criminals could get a hold of, that's kind of a tale as old as time.
Yeah, if you've got a long, even though it's a long gun, but a shorter version of a long gun, it's like you need to conceal it. It's like, cool, a longer garment that can conceal something so that you can whip your gun out.
And I do want to quickly say, like, I think people look at this and they don't think, oh, you know, like that's a fighting shotgun, right? I think you have to put yourself in the time period. Most cops didn't carry long guns. Some did. Most of the time they were lever actions of some sort. You might have a pump action shotgun every once in a while. Most of them carried pretty anemic revolver cartridges. So, you know, when you have guys with, you know, submachine guns, the cut down BARs, which have also sometimes been referred to as Whippit guns too, and this, I mean, that gives you a lot of firepower.
Oh, yeah.
And in a relatively small package as well.
Yep. 5-round tube on these. We'll throw some rounds in for a sec and then send a couple.
I believe it's a 4-round tube and then...
Oh, 4-round tube plus one. Yeah.
Because you, see, I load it, chamber it, and then load one more. Flip that on.
Yeah, for some reason I like my system. And you've got to press the little button on the side also to basically deactivate the gate or allow you to load it.
And I think this also might be a good time to practically demonstrate the magazine shutoff.
Yeah.
Might as well.
Could do that.
While we're here. So, firstly, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the magazine shutoff. So I'm going to come around here. I'm going to flip this lever. And again, it's just a hook that depresses the shotgun shell back into the tube. So pretty, honestly, a super cool little feature. This is more of a holdover of the shotgun's sporting arm use, of course. As a you know, gangster, I don't think you would want to do that.
Probably not.
We're just going to brace the gun on our hip here.
I threw your safety on, by the way.
Oh, I'm going to take the safety off. Thank you, sir. Brace the gun on the hip. Kind of get your ass behind it a little bit, and we're going to fire. Cool. Now, you'll notice, even though we have rounds in the tube, it's still locked open. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to flip that back, and it loads around. I
actually didn't know that it auto-loaded. That's the first time I've seen that sequence of things. That's cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
So then we're right back in the fight, if you will, and we'll just torch these off. Boom.
She runs. Originally, we thought it was a little ammo picky and needed high brass, but the real situation is it needs a backstop.
Yeah.
It needs something. It needs some ass, a hip, a chest, something behind the gun, and it seems to cycle low brass just fine.
I think if you're someone who does want a Whippit gun of your own, you want to cut down A5 or Remington Model 11, that's cool. I would advocate you probably keep the stock.
Yeah.
For this purpose,
yeah,
cool.
right.
Yeah, right. Like we're trying to provide you with some historical context. But for actual use as a shooter, I'd keep the stock.
One other thing, and then we'll cut to the studio to talk about the actual conversion, but these are very prone to cracking on the fore-end.
Yep.
Okay. So this is the original wood, and this one was cracked. It was repaired, and then it cracked again, and now it is pinned up, and it looks like, you know, it's just mangled. There's pins and everything to really like mechanically hold it together. But if you wind up with a Model 10 or an A5, just know that fore-end is very prone to crack, and most of the replacements you will find are already cracked. So it's just kind of a known issue you might have to deal with.
Sure.
Okay, back to the studio. Guys, a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video. That would be National Armory. They're good folks. They're over in the Pittsburgh, PA area. We actually found them on the hunt for Gucci guns. That is where I picked up my Mac 11 that you guys have also seen a video on. And as someone who has toured a lot of gun shops all over the country, they are definitely amongst the finest because their selection of goodies spans from new, cool, nice, modern production stuff to vintage classic things, much like the A5. I wouldn't be shocked if they had like a Model 10, maybe not an A5, but they might have a Model 10 in there. Like who stinking knows? But you can definitely check them out. Like I said, if you're local, that's great. Or if you're not local, no problem. National Armory, if you do a little bit of searching, I have no doubt in your ability to find that. And if you do, you guys can plug in the code 1911, that is 1911, that will save you 10% off over at National Armory. We appreciate their support. Like I said, they got great things. They support us, so we appreciate that you guys support them. All right, thanks. On with the show.
So interestingly, the Browning, or excuse me, FNA5, we'll call it, came actually from a lawsuit with Georg Luger of the Luger fame. Mm-hmm. Browning originally wanted to do a toggle action shotgun, which is really cool. They actually have a prototype of that in Ogden at the museum. And then the lawsuit happened. Winchester was kind of, shaky on it. This gun actually is the gun that ends up breaking the relationship between Winchester and Browning. So really, really kind of a big part of the Browning story. And then, of course, he goes straight over at, Winchester doesn't want it. There's some other drama in America around the shotgun. He takes it to FN. They're like, hell yeah,
we'll
brother.
Take it.
We're going to take it, and they sell a lot of them. Production officially, I believe, begins in 1903. I believe your gun is a 1927, correct?
27, yep.
Yeah, so with that, I mean, we can get straight into your gun. And some of the modifications, of course, that's not how you got it.
No, so the funny thing about this gun is you guys have seen it before. If you think back to the Hunt for Gucci Guns Chicago, and I say Chicago on purpose because the Hunt for Gucci Guns Suburbs of Chicago edition doesn't really have a ring to it.
Town outside Chicago.
But all you Chicagoites or Owens or whatever Chicagans, Chicagoans, you get real territorial about your suburbs and letting me know you can't buy a gun in Chicago. I bought this bad boy in Chicago, okay? It's a suburb. Who gives a shit? And it was on the Hunt for Gucci Guns, and it was really cool. We'll show you a little clip from that now.
Jake
in an uncharacteristic move.
Yeah.
Jake, pick up what you got.
Yeah,
like,
Jake,
you're going to have to hold it
and
tell everyone what you have decided to get.
Look, I don't hardly know. Other than
it's a Browning A5.
Yes.
An FNA5.
Eli said this can become the Bonnie Parker shotgun. We'll SBS it. He had me at short barrel, and I was like, well, I guess I'm the sucker today.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, yes, the original gun was a Remington Model 11, but let's be honest, the A5 is the more gangster of the two variations of that gun, so you definitely should cut the barrel on this one.
So this is not a gun that was like on my radar until that road trip that we did that spanned like a third of the country, and really, really cool. So basically, I got the gun purposely to do this. Like I was never intending to leave it as 20-inch barrel.
I think I talked you into buying it.
Yeah,
based on that. Yeah.
So basically, I got it, came in, sent it right over to MK3 Firearms down in Vegas. Great gunsmiths. They do awesome work. We've had multiple guns from them on the channel, obviously. But I mean, pretty much what you're looking at here, and they were, you know, like this is right up their alley. So chop the barrel. The barrel was not 20 inches. I think it started out, who knows what it was. I don't know. It was way longer than this.
Oh, your gun was probably 26, 28 inches.
Yeah, somewhere in
there.
that ballpark. So currently it sits at about 17 inches, which means this is an SBS. Okay, so this is an NFA item at this point. So about a 17-inch barrel, which should be pretty close to what Bonnie's was. I guess we don't truly know.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
But and then obviously chopping down the back of the stock. You know, as we mentioned, you can't take this all the way off because part of that action reciprocates into the stock. So this is really about as short as you can go before, like, hey, you effectively just tanked your whole shotgun.
Correct.
Like, you basically just broke a shotgun. But even when they took this apart, there was some part of the action was broken that they had to replace, and you know, tuned her up, got her working, pinned up the forearm here. But yeah, fundamentally, I mean, it's a reasonably simple conversion. I mean, it's chopping a barrel, it's chopping a stock. It's like there's not really that much to do.
Well, and it goes into the whole idea of the Barrow Gang. I mean, they were not we'll call it like a syndicate supported gang. You know,
right. Yeah.
They were not getting nicely done firearms like some of the other gangsters where they were going to like big time gunsmiths like Lebman. They were doing all that on the road with guns they stole. So,
yeah.
I mean, really, the only thing they really had to do is cut the barrel off, cut the back of the stock,
right,
and go to town. So,
and even the finish. I mean, we left the finish rough on purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And that gun, it looks perfect.
I mean,
I don't think you could have gotten a better host for that conversion.
I mean, it's amazing. Like, you know, the gun was, you know, really well priced. So I got the gun at a good price. Obviously, it's a reasonably simple set of mods. The gun can be, you know, occasionally quirky here and there in ammo. It seems like we largely got the kinks worked out at the range. It was actually the best the gun has run. It was at the range a couple of days. Yeah, you know, and so. Look, you know, I mean, the video today is reasonably simple. I mean, obviously, we got a few more additions of this. This one's probably actually the most simple, but it's like sometimes there's just guns that are cool. And, you know, in many ways, it's even like, you know, P38s and Lugers and things where you're like, look, man, the gun's got a dark history, but it's like, it's still a cool gun and something that like a true gun guy should be able to appreciate and think is pretty cool, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And again, we have to realize that gun spurred on a whole development of automatic combat shotguns.
Right.
So, you know, while certain aspects of its history are dark, I mean, welcome to history.
Yeah.
Most of it's dark, kind of like Payback.
Yes, exactly right.
Kind of like Payback. But, you know, it's kind of, you know, it's a unique piece of history. It's a uniquely American piece of history. And I think we do talk about it, you know, and obviously like Bonnie Parker, not great. But
no.
Gun's cool.
Gun is super cool. So that's it, guys, really. Drop any questions, comments, anything you got down below. We'll try to get back to you. But, hey, look, the Whippit gun, is this something you guys could do? Yeah, you could actually do something like this pretty easily.
And I actually would say, real quick, last final thought here, if you don't cut down the buttstock and you cut it to 18 inches,
right.
First of all, no tax stamp.
Yeah.
Secondly, a genuinely
good shotgun
for like
all-purpose good shotgun.
Like if you said, hey, Eli, you got to defend your home with a 18-inch, A5.
Yeah, you could do a lot worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool, guys. All right, that's the video for today. We will see you next week. Catch you then.